Okay, let's unpack this. What city holds the title of America's oldest continuously inhabited city? If you're thinking, Boston, maybe New York, or even Jamestown, well, you might be surprised.
Yeah, it's actually St. Augustine down in
Mhm.
Florida. And it's a place whose history, honestly, it kind of reframes how we usually think about America's colonial beginnings.
That is surprising to a lot of folks, I think, and it makes you wonder right away what gave it that staying power. So, today we're going to do a deep dive into St. Augustine's incredibly rich, sort of complex history. We'll go from its dramatic founding right up to its legacy today. We've looked at a whole range of sources, historical records, archaeology, cultural studies, to pull out the key facts, the surprising bits. All right, so let's jump right into the founding. The date, September 8th, 1565. That date is, well, it's crucial. How does that stack up against, say, Plymouth or Jamestown, the ones we usually hear about first?
Well, it completely changes the timeline, doesn't it?
Yeah.
St. Augustine is more than 55 years older than Plymouth and a full 42 years before Jamestown, which many people think was the absolute first English settlement.
Right.
But, what's fascinating here is the continuity. That's the key word. How did it keep going when others didn't?
Right, that continuous part.
Exactly. It wasn't just luck. It was a mix of things, strategic spot, defenses that kept evolving, and just a really stubborn population, frankly, that adapted no matter whose flag was flying. It really tells you something about resilience, about holding onto that piece of land.
Yeah, that resilience, it's more than just a historical detail, isn't it? It speaks volumes about the place itself. Okay, so let's picture the 1500s. Spain is the global superpower. They want to protect their trade routes, claim land in the Americas. This wasn't just a vague idea, right? There was a specific trigger for Florida.
Absolutely. St. Augustine's founding was a direct reaction, really a geopolitical move. The French started showing up, exploring Florida, setting up Fort Caroline. Spain saw that as a major threat, especially to their treasure fleets sailing nearby in the straits.
Ah, okay, so it was about protecting the money route.
Pretty much. So they dispatched Pedro Menendez de Aviles. His orders were crystal clear. Secure Florida for Spain. He arrives with big fleet, lands near Atuco village, and names the settlement St. Augustine. Why? Because he landed on St. Augustine of Hippo's feast day.
Makes sense. But this founding, it wasn't exactly peaceful, was it? Reading about Menendez, it sounds like things got violent fast. He basically wiped out the Friends.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. It wasn't just a rough start. It was defining. Menendez went straight for Fort Caroline and eliminated the French presence there very brutally. That action set a precedent. Spain was serious about holding Florida. No compromises. And that really shaped St. Augustine from day one. It had to be a military outpost, a fortress.
A fortress city. And that leads us to its most famous landmark, the Castillo de San Marcos. Iconic, oldest masonry fort in the continental U.S., late 1600s. But the material it's built from, that's something else.
Right. What's fascinating here is the coquina, C-O-Q-U-I-N-A. It's a type of limestone, basically just millions of tiny crushed shells naturally cemented together.
Shells as a building material for a fort.
Yeah, sounds counterintuitive maybe. But here's the genius part, connecting it to the bigger picture of colonial ingenuity. Coquina is relatively soft. So when cannonballs hit it, instead of shattering the wall like they would with harder stone, they often just, sank into it or bounced off. The walls sort of absorbed the impact.
Wow. So the cannonballs got to kind of hug from the wall instead of breaking it. That's wild. But even with that amazing defense, the city had a rough time. Lots of attacks over the years, right? The British, pirates.
Oh, constantly. Sir Francis Drake, the famous privateer, basically a pirate. Okay, he attacked. The city got burned down more than once. It was a really contested spot.
And the flag kept changing, too.
It really did. Spain had it, then Britain got it after the 7 Years' War, then Spain got it back after the American Revolution. And finally, the U.S. acquired Florida from Spain in 1821.
So Spain, Britain, Spain again, U.S.
Exactly. And this raises an important question. What does this constant changing of hands tell us? It underlines just how strategically vital St. Augustine was perceived to be. That location, controlling access, protecting shipping lanes, it was the key piece on the colonial chessboard.
Okay, so fast forward from those colonial struggles. The story shifts again dramatically in the 20th century. St. Augustine played a major role in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, something maybe not everyone knows.
That's right. It became a really significant and quite dangerous battleground. You had activists like Dr. Robert Hayling leading local efforts, and then Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the SCLC came in 1964. They organized marches, sit-ins, wade-ins at the segregated beaches.
Wade-ins in the ocean.
Yeah, protesting beach segregation. And the response was often incredibly violent. Pictures, news reports of the brutality here in St. Augustine, they shocked the nation. Dr. King even said the violence was maybe worse than Birmingham or Selma.
Wow.
And many historians argue that the events right here in St. Augustine provided a crucial final push. They helped build the public and political pressure needed to pass the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 that summer.
So a direct line from the protests there to that historic legislation. Powerful stuff. Now, switching gears a bit, alongside this documented history, there's another layer to St. Augustine. Its reputation as, well, one of America's most haunted cities. Here's where it gets really interesting, maybe taking us from fact to folklore.
It definitely has that reputation. You hear all sorts of stories. Ghosts at the old jail, phantom soldiers maybe pacing the walls of the Castillo at night, whispers in the old cemeteries, that sort of thing.
Whether you believe in ghosts or not, these stories are part of the city's identity now, aren't they? Like echoes of its long, often turbulent past?
Absolutely. They add another layer to the visitor experience, tapping into that deep sense of history.
And speaking of visiting today, what's St. Augustine like now? It sounds like a place where the past and present are really intertwined.
Very much so. It's vibrant. You've got the stunning colonial Spanish architecture, especially downtown, great historic walking tours, lovely beaches nearby. And the Castillo, of course, is still there, anchoring it all.
So you can really walk through history.
You absolutely can. Stroll down St. George Street, which is pedestrian only, lots of shops and cafes. You can explore Flagler College, which is itself housed in a stunning Gilded Age hotel building. Visit the oldest wooden schoolhouse. It's not just about seeing history, it's about feeling it around you.
And they lean into the fun side too, right? Pirate ships, ghost tours.
Oh yeah, you can definitely take a ride on a replica pirate ship or do one of those spooky ghost tours after dark. It makes history interactive, engaging. It's not dusty here. It feels alive.
So, to sum it all up, St. Augustine isn't just America's oldest city. It's this incredibly layered, fascinating place full of stories from basically every major chapter of American history. Hopefully this deep dive has given you a good sense of just how unique and, frankly, how resilient this city is.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about what it means for a place to endure for so long, through so much conflict, so much change. How does that kind of continuous survival, that adaptation, reflect on identity? Not just for a city, but maybe even for us personally or as a nation. What does it really take to persist?